buyers just don't have that. They don't have that emotional equity in your business. They're looking at the numbers. To them, your business is not the next $1 billion idea. It's a $200,000 idea that they're about to buy, right? So that's always important to separate. And if you are a seller and you really believe that your business is worth more, I would never sell your business based off potential, because what's going to happen if you say like, oh no, this business is worth way more because of XYZ, it's going to grow, then that buyer is just going to lowball you. Like, sure, okay.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer here from Digital Triggers and Show Me the Nuggets, and I'm super excited as always to be here with another very special guest, Greg Elfrink from Empire Flippers. So before we go any further, Greg, I got to make sure I didn't butcher your name too bad.
No, you did a good job. I always think that my name is really easy to pronounce because it's just like, magical creature elf and a hockey rink combined, like Lord of the Rings on ice skates, but some people can't seem to get it.
Awesome, man. Well, welcome officially to the show. I'm super excited to have you. So for those of you guys that don't know, Greg is ultimately the director of marketing over at Empire Flippers. And I think you guys are up to some really cool stuff over there. I remember, in fact, like it was yesterday, man, it must have been going on 4 years ago. I think I heard about Empire Flippers, and I had a student that showed up to one of my masterminds and live events and was like, hey man, I got this offer on my site. I'm about to sell it. And I just wanted to ask you for your feedback. Like, what are your thoughts? And that's how I got introduced to Empire Flippers. And he had built an affiliate site. I think he got like 39 times monthly profit. And I was like, dude, like, yes, please take that, run. Like, yes, you've got to. And I was really shocked at the valuation that he got, because I think that you guys were really on the forefront of getting some of these better valuations and better numbers, versus sites in the marketplace that everybody's familiar with, like Flippa and elsewhere, where you're lucky if you could, at least at that time, I think get 8 to 12 months, on a decent site. So I was like, man, that's freaking amazing. And it just opened my eyes. And I remember that's how I heard about Empire Flippers.
Wow, that's awesome, man. There's all sorts of like cool stories like that. I was at a conference in Chiang Mai, not to derail this right away, but I'm a tangential kind of person, but I was speaking at a conference in Chiang Mai. I think it was Chiang Mai SEO. One of the speakers, him and I were coming down, and he told me at his Airbnb, he was in this elevator with a guy wearing an EF shirt. So he just assumed the guy worked with me. He's like, so how's it like working with Greg? And the guy was like, no, I'm not even going to the conference. I don't work with Greg. I'm a customer. I sold my site. I think it was an affiliate site. And like, I haven't done anything in 4 years now. He's like just retired in Chiang Mai after selling a site with us. So all sorts of cool stories like that.
That's awesome, man. So got to be cool being a part of the team over there at Empire Flippers. So before we get too deep into things, man, I want to make sure and kind of get your background. How'd you end up being part of the team? Kind of where do you come from? What's your background before we get too deep into things?
Yeah, so I got your typical internet marketer background. I'm from Alaska. I used to work in the Arctic Circle as an oil field roughneck for good old Halliburton, the evil empire, as I used to call it.
Where at Alaska?
So very far north, 6 miles off the north coast of Alaska. So far north there isn't even land. You're driving on the ice because the ocean freezes. You know that show Ice Road Truckers? So yeah. I used to work with those guys. I hate that show because they're so, like, the show makes it seem like their job is so dangerous and hard, but they are the laziest guys in the world, man. I'd be like freezing my ass off, covered in chemicals that are like hardening, and I have to be out there like getting the hose from their truck to like transfer the fluid and everything while they're just like sitting in their warm cab. And I'm wearing like refrigerator gloves over my normal gloves with like heat warmers in there. Like, I hate these guys. So I was up there on an island for several years. I've worked in North Dakota as well, and then the Gulf of Mexico. And the TLDR of my story was I absolutely hated my life. I was one of those guys living like the quiet desperation. Never went to college. Always thought it was kind of like scammy, which we could talk about if you like. A lot of people disagree with me, but some of my friends now see the wisdom of my words after they get their debt. But yeah, so I tried to work in marketing for a long time. I always thought it was cool. I view myself as kind of like an artist. So I write fiction for fun and poetry and stuff like that. And marketing to me is a form of art. No one would hire me. Like the agencies in Alaska, they were like, what is this SEO? This is too new. We do social media. Like, what are you talking about? It's too new. SEO is like from the 90s, you know, it's like the oldest form of marketing. But they wouldn't hire me because of that. And also like I didn't have a degree. I'm an oil field roughneck, so like, what does this guy know, right? So I had given up all hope of ever like breaking out of that cycle, of this terrible cycle of buying courses and never getting anywhere with anywhere. It was funny when I gave up hope and I just started writing PBN articles for, I think it was 1.5 cents per word. I was making about $1,000 a month, very fast writer. I remember one of my clients, he had me write so many articles about plumbing in Ohio. And then he had this one PBN that was like a fiction-based PBN. I don't know what his money site was for, but it was cool. I got to write like one 500-word article for him a week on that. He found out I was still in the oil field, and he's like, "Fuck, man! If I was doing that, hopefully I can cuss on here. Sorry,
No,
oil field guy. Like man, if I realize I didn't realize you were still working that job, I'd be so burned out I was doing that plus writing these PBN articles as much as you do. I know you have other clients." I was like, yeah, man, just because you're burned out doesn't mean you stop paying your bills, right? Like you got to keep
for
going.
sure.
So it was when I gave up pretty much most of my hope is when I built this gritty determination through writing those PBNs and just kind of built up my confidence a little bit. Started that extra $1,000 a month at that time was significant to me to start paying off a lot of the debt I had accrued, and I had a fire in my house, like all sorts of fun stuff. So what ended up happening was I decided, I'm going to like approach building an affiliate site with the same kind of positive nihilism kind of that I have going on for myself. And I found Empire Flippers, which I was obsessed with internet marketing. So I had heard of EF before. I think I might be wrong on this, but I think I even watched a few webinars with you way back in the day when I was still in the oil field. Pretty sure because the Triggers name, that brand, like it's always stuck in my mind. It's like, I know I probably bought something from this guy at one point in my course junkie life, But anyways, so I was going to build an affiliate website. Didn't care how long it would take. Going to build it up. I'm going to sell it on Empire Flippers, and then I'm going to quit the oil job and just be debt free and make $1,000 a month as a writer in some random shit place that's not Alaska, but at least it's not Alaska. That was my goal. And then, so I signed up for the EF list, and they sent out this thing that they're looking for a content marketer or a content manager. And back then we had this thing called the apprenticeship program. I applied thinking like it'd be like 1,000 other jobs where I won't even hear back. And sure enough, I got the job. It was an interesting story when I told my oil boss that I was leaving to do marketing, and he was like, "Oh man, you always wanted to do that. Where are you going?" Like, well, they want me to fly to Vietnam. I'm like, what? Like, are you sure, Greg? Are you sure this is real? Like, I don't know. I guess I'll find out when I get there.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's so funny. I see that my team does some research before every podcast episode, and the team said that you're from Anchorage, actually. That's where you were born?
Yeah. It's not too of a weird thing if you're from Alaska. About 2/3 of the population lives there. Everyone basically lives in Anchorage.
Gotcha. That makes sense. It's like, so I have some like distant relatives that lived in Alaska. They don't anymore, but in Anchorage, and some in Homer. It's just really weird because I know like we have got a couple of successful agencies at Invisible PPC, and like we got 3 or 4 agencies, I think, working with us that are big, decent sized agencies in Anchorage. Like it's
really
just small world, right? Like crazy small world.
That is crazy. Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at it, this was probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago when I was trying to apply for agencies in Alaska. Like most of them didn't do any sort of internet marketing. It was all TV ads, like the big the edgy agency at the time. I just started doing like social media marketing. It wasn't like anything crazy, you know. I actually had a funny story. So I was going to do SEO for one of these agencies, like white label it, thinking like, this is the ticket. I'm going to get out of the oil field, right? And so I break this proposal to this agency that's doing the social stuff, and they're like, yeah, that sounds cool. And they're the ones who told me SEO is too new. Like, it's older than social media. But anyways, so they ended up like, you know, giving me this long roundabout thing, and we're like, oh no, we decided not to go with you. I'm like, all right, fine. And I even wrote them like a training manual on how to sell it, like how their people could sell it. Like, I went real deep on it, right? Anyways, so 3-4 months later, I see an ad from them selling SEO service. Like,
So let's shift for a second and talk about Empire Flippers. I feel like everybody listening to the show, watching the show, should know Empire Flippers, but maybe they don't, or maybe they don't know why you are different in the marketplace. You want to talk a little bit about Empire Flippers and what you guys are all about?
yeah, sure. So if your audience isn't familiar with us, our elevator pitch is we take the friction out of buying and selling online businesses. So that's anywhere from like an affiliate site to an e-commerce store to a SaaS. There's some more esoteric business models out there that we deal with too, like KDP, Kindle Publishing, or Merch by Amazon. We've sold apps as well. So pretty much anything that is only online, we can help you find a buyer. And really the range is all over the place. So we sell anything from, you know, a $20,000 SaaS, a $20,000 affiliate site to a $2 million SaaS business that we have on the marketplace right now. And the biggest business we sold so far is 4.1 million Amazon FBA business. And I think maybe not this year, but definitely within the next 2.5 years, we're going to break that 8-figure mark as well. So that's what we do. We have a full-on service to help you actually go and negotiate that deal with a buyer. Or if you are the buyer, we help you come up with a good criteria, you know, make sure the business actually matches your goals and your skill sets. Because, you know, we're not into the high pressure thing. We approach everything very consultative. If someone comes to us like, hey, I have no online business experience, but I have $500,000 to invest, I want to buy the SaaS business. Like, okay, well, what do you know about coding? Like, nothing. Like, okay, do you know how to manage developers? Like, no. Have you ever managed someone? Like, no. Like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the right business for you. Like, let's look at some other stuff. Of course, we can't stop them from buying that business, and sometimes that works out really well. Actually, you never know, right? People have the grit to succeed at, you know, anything, but we do try to steer people towards the right investment that matches both their skills, goals, and really their lifestyle too. At the end of the day.
On another podcast recently, I heard you break down kind of the different buyer personas of people that buy. And I thought that was really cool. People that buy sites and the different personas. Can you walk through kind of high level who those different types of people are? Because I think that matches up with what you just said, right? It's like you're coming in, you're brand spanking new, but you want to buy SaaS? Like that's not quite a fit. And I think it's important that people, like, sometimes people just don't even know the right questions to ask, right? So they come in and it's just like, yeah, SaaS, I want that, right? But they don't understand the ramifications of that as a decision. So I think it would be cool if you could walk us through the different buyer personas, so to speak.
Yeah, recurring revenue is great till the code breaks and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the different buyer personas, and we have seller personas too, but seller personas tend to be a little bit more common, like with what they share. Buyer personas is really based off a few different things. So the most common of them all is what we call newbie norm. They're the ones just starting off. Maybe they are that person with 500K. Just because they're new doesn't mean they don't have money. They often can have a lot of money. Maybe they're a real estate investor, a stockbroker, whatever it is, just a high net worth individual. But they're not super skilled yet with online business. They're still just trying to figure everything out. And if you're the seller selling to someone like newbie norm, then I always advise you to be very supportive. Instead of 30-day support, which is pretty normal, maybe offer 60-day support. They probably won't even need it. But the point is to make them feel confident that you're there with them, not that you're just like, gone like smoke and mirrors the moment that you get the money, right? So those are newbie norms. Like I said, those are very common, mainly because our industry is growing so much. So you always are going to have more new people than the veterans typically. Then the next one that is really common is portfolio Paul. So this would be like probably a lot of people in your audience that are pretty skilled at affiliate marketing. They're building out real brands that are monetized through affiliate sites or Amazon FBA businesses or e-commerce stores. It all, doesn't matter in terms of business model, but their basic premise is I want to build a portfolio of high cash flow streams, right? And they sometimes diversify through different business models, or more likely the same business model, but diversify with different brands and maybe different paid traffic or different traffic sources in general, that kind of thing. The next one is Flipper Fred. And so this is where we get half of our name actually as Empire Flippers. And these are the guys just like real estate flippers, right? You come in, you buy a house for, I don't know, 40K or 50K, and you do renovations, and now it's worth 100K, 150K, and you flip it, right? So same exact concept. They come in and buy a $100,000, $200,000 site from us. They increase that net profit, and then they sell it for almost double, or sometimes much more than double, depending on how well they did, usually over a 6 to 12 month period. Since I've been with EF, I've seen the same business sold, I think, 4 times. So it's pretty cool. 2 times that business went up significantly as well. So those 3 are probably the most common of them all. And then there is ones called like Strategic Sally, for instance. Now if you use a broker like us, it's unlikely you'll find a Strategic Sally, because they typically won't use a broker, because what they're looking for is so specific that unless the broker goes and finds the deal for them, they're often not going to find what they want on the marketplace. It does happen. It's just really rare. That person is like, say they owned a jump rope business, right? E-commerce that sells jump ropes, and they go and find an affiliate site all about fitness. And so there's synergy there where the sums of their parts are greater than the individual, or however that saying goes. So they're willing to pay a higher multiple typically than other buyers, because they understand the value of what that synergy can bring to them. And then there's Investor Ivan. So Investor Ivan, he is similar to Portfolio Paul, typically less online business skills, but they tend to understand the model. And they'll usually have an operator who's actually running the business, and they're more like the money person. So they supply the capital. And they tend to love, especially e-commerce businesses, because a lot of the reasons why sellers sell e-commerce businesses because they want to take the cash out, right? Like Amazon FBA, very capital intensive business. You're always putting more money in to get to that next margin break, right? And so an Investor Ivan can come in and just instantly deploy that cash and get that economies of scale right away that will increase their margin. So they tend to love e-commerce businesses, but they buy other ones as well, of course. And finally, this guy is called Do-It-Yourself Dave, or DIY Dave. And usually this is like the second transformation of what happens to a newbie norm once they get into it and understand the business a little bit better. This is someone that is like, ready to roll up their sleeves. They like to buy stuff, particularly that have a problem that they can go and fix. They really want to get into the nitty gritty of everything. So those are the different kinds of personas of everything.
And then when you look at who's buying stuff right now in the marketplace, how do these break down? Right? Like, where do most of the sales come from? Or are there any kind of takeaways on which of these personas is actually like really active or doing the bulk, or is it just completely spread out?
Yeah, so buyers are a lot more diverse than sellers are. Now, a lot of sellers, they become buyers. Like a lot of our sellers, they become Portfolio Pauls or Flipper Freds, especially. So, they sell a few businesses with us. Now they have the cash. They go and buy a business that is what I call wounded, that they can go and fix, and then they flip it or add it to their portfolio, right? So that's another section where buyers can come from. But like I said earlier, man, most of them are going to be newbie norms just because the industry is growing so fast. So there's more and more people coming into our space all the time. So that's going to be the majority of the buyers that you're probably going to be working with. And that's good to know that going in, because they might ask you some questions like, how does this guy not know about, keyword density? Like, who is this guy I'm talking to, right? Like, so you got to be aware
this
of
guy's
that,
not
who you're
serious.
speaking to.
He's not going to buy my stuff. He doesn't even know what keyword density is. So earlier, you talked about college being scammy. Before we get too far in, I'd love to get your thoughts on that and why.
So I grew up with a dad who grew up in fairly poor family in rural Missouri before he went on the grand adventure to move to Alaska. Right? I have a saying in Alaska: you're either the son or daughter of an exile, or you are the exile. And so my dad, self-imposed exile, went on an adventure right to Alaska. And I remember when my sister, she's older than me, she graduated high school. She looked at my dad and she was like, Dad, where's my college fund? And my dad, like, he wasn't trying to be sarcastic. He was genuinely when he asked her, like, what is a college fund? What are you talking about? What is that? And he just didn't know. He had never heard of this thing, you know? And she was like, are you kidding? Like, no. And so there was no college fund. She asked him, well, what were you doing with our dividend money? Because Alaskans get paid a small dividend every year for living there. He's like, so I took you to Disney World every year. It was the dividends, So I always like was against college, but I always think that's a funny story. The reason why I'm against college, so I like I said, I was a weird kid. I used to stay up to like 4 a.m. Had a TV in my room. I'd see the infomercials, like everyone saying like, "Oh, government secrets." The guy with the question mark suit. I think that guy's one of my favorites with Billy Myers or whatever. Billy
Billy
Mays.
Mays.
Like,
Yeah.
buy these steak knives, just like really loud and boisterous. But I used to watch this stuff all the time, and like information was often a common product being sold there. So I always viewed college as the same thing as an information product funnel, and
Yep.
one that gives you just not as good of information because it's super untargeted,
Yep.
super general, and like I just, and especially if you're in America, like if your viewers are in Europe, this argument kind of goes out the window. But in America, you have to pay a pretty high price and often get loans and go into massive amount of debt. I have friends making 40, 50K a year right now that are $200,000 or more in debt from college. And like that is crushing, right? And some of them are
Yep.
working really noble professions. And like it just is so unnecessary in my opinion. Like I don't get it. I think college gets a pass on this. Like if they were like an informational marketer that didn't have this like powerful marketing machine, there would be like scam videos everywhere about college. But because they have this like strong cultural marketing apparatus going on for them, no one questions it. They just like, yeah, you spend 100K, go get a degree you'll never use, and then pay it off. It's like I just don't get the thing. When I worked at FedEx, I was like shipping packages in this freight, right? My trainer, he got like if I was the same level of seniority as that guy, like I was the trainer, he would get paid more than me as if he was working there 8 years longer than me because he had a 4-year degree. And at FedEx, if you have 1 year of college, it counts as 2 years of work. His degree was in
Yeah.
theology. It has nothing to do with logistics, and yet there it is. Just mind-boggling to me. So that's why I'm not a big fan of college. Some of it is totally worth it. It's not 100% a scam.
Yep.
Like
I,
engineering, all that stuff, I think is real.
I completely agree with everything that you've said. For me
Glad.
though, like I always mentally though then have a problem. Like my brain stops like working out how to fix it when I start to think about like actual like professionals. It's like, so wait, so we're gonna like give a home study course to like a surgeon? Like that's a little strange, right? Like,
Not what you might
we're
want to
gonna
show up
give the
in
heart
class.
surgeon, we're gonna send him the little operator game, right, in the
Yeah.
mail. Well, yeah,
The- the-
you can't pass. According to the records that we received over the internet from your operator game, you got a really shaky hand, man. You need to lay off the booze.
Oh, that would be so awesome if they like created like a VR thing where they actually like did that. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. With some professions, it makes absolute sense. Medicine,
Yeah,
law, engineering, all that stuff makes absolute sense. But most degrees don't,
yeah,
in my opinion, aren't
completely.
really needed.
Yeah, completely agree. I think huge reform is needed in that space, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think to sum it up, I would tell like I got two boys. I got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. That's a long way away, but I would tell them unless they're going for fun and to party and just to have a social experience, or they're going to be like a dentist, a doctor, a surgeon, like something crazy professional, that I wouldn't suggest it. But either way, college will be on their dime because I think it's a decision that they need to make. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of adults have bought into the idea and then paid for their kids to go do it. And so
Right.
they never earned the dollar. They never respected the dollar. Right. They kind of pissed it away and made it, unfortunately, kind of a norm as well. And then you got the other side of people that didn't, right? And now they went to school. They brought on all this debt. I can't agree with you more. I think it's a shame.
I was in Bangkok treating some clients out at this club or whatever. It's like 2 a.m. or something like that. In Asia, everything goes way late, right? And I remember getting this text message from a good buddy of mine, actually, from college. I never went to college, but I would go to the parties still, right? And I remember him always thinking, he was like on the debate team, extremely intelligent guy, really, really nice guy. And he did become a lawyer, and he texted me like, "Hey man, what are you up to?" And I, sent him a picture from the club, whatever. He's like, "Oh man, back in college, I used to think like this is a novel guy. He's gonna have a rude awakening one day." But now I realize it was me who had the rude awakening in this like sweaty office in like some random state, like hating everything about it. I always thought that was a really vindicating thing. I felt bad for him, obviously. A really good guy, like I said, good friend of mine. But yeah, that was vindicating, especially after, all the trials in the oil field and failing at this internet marketing thing where everyone thought I was crazy. My crew used to call me Google Cash. Like, how's Google doing today, Greg? Like, so yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think about the investment in yourself and in internet marketing, compared to college, right? I think it's unfortunate that most people just fail before they get their degree, right? Before they make it out the other side, quote unquote, successful, right? Or they get their degree, right? They fall out, they lose track of it, and they go get a real job, or they just lose the momentum and the foresight that they had before.
Nothing wrong with the job. I'm a gainfully employed.
No, gainfully employed, but you love what you do.
A job with meaning.
You love what you do. You can see it. Like, you glow from what you do every day. It's not the typical path, so to speak.
For sure, absolutely.
So, you see people coming into Empire Flippers as buyers, thinking about buying a business versus building a business. Is that a thought in the market's mind?
Oh, absolutely. And we say this all the time. So if you're looking to get started, buying a business might not be the right path for you. It could be the right path, but you got to ask yourself a few questions. If you have more money than you have time, then buying a business is going to significantly decrease the timeline to profitability, right? It's making profit from literally minute zero because you bought a business that's already making money, right? We have a funny little catchphrase like how to buy money, right? You just buy these assets. One of our customers coined that. I can't claim it, but he's bought a lot from us, and he always has these like awesome one-liners. But yeah, so like it really depends. If you have more time than you have money, then building is probably the right path because you can build up something and slowly invest into it and make it happen. And then when you do go sell it, which this is actually a pretty common story, with someone who didn't have that much money to build out something up, then they sell it with us. Say they sold it for, even just 50 grand, nothing like huge, life-changing money. They probably had the most, that's probably the most capital windfall that they've ever had in their life, right? But it's not like, some of our bigger sellers, or like the guy who cashed in the $4 million check from us, right? But that $50,000, now they might go out and buy a 25K site, use that other 25K to have vendors, agencies, all sorts of systems in place to boom that site and make that site go where they can sell it for 100K, right? And then they just start doing that leapfrog. So it really depends where you are, both financially and from a time perspective. From financial stuff, I would never recommend, like, say you had $100,000 to invest and that was your complete net worth in life. I would never invest that money, right? Like, never invest your emergency money, college fund if you're doing that thing. Like I respect it if you're doing it. That's cool. You're giving it to your kids. But yeah, like nothing that is set aside for something else. You should never think of it like this is my ticket. I'm gonna like be able to quit my job instantly. Everything's going to go great, because business always has risk and internet businesses can be volatile. So just be aware of that. If you had that, say you had $150,000, I always recommend splitting that into thirds. So 50,000 pools of 3 pools, and then buy a 50K business once, see how it goes, and then buy a second one. Because by the time you get to that second one, you're going to know so much more that you wish you had known, and you had rationed out your investable liquidity enough to keep you in the game long enough to really learn something. So by the time you get to that third business, you just all know what to do, right?
Yep, off to the races for sure. You said something that I want to back out and kind of focus on for a second here. Sure. Is you talked about kind of newbie Norm turning into DIY Dave, right?
Yeah.
By in that transition, by building up their skills, but also buying something maybe first time smaller, right? Getting it working and then reinvesting or selling that one. And I mean, I think something that's worth noting is just thinking about the parallel of buying websites and FBA businesses or e-com businesses and investing in it like we would invest in like traditional real estate, right? So you got the buy and the hold and the long-term strategy, and you
A
got
lot of
the
similarities,
got the
yeah.
flip in the you said kind of 6 to 12 month timeline, which Flipper Fred is doing.
So the question is, you're asking like, how does that transition happen?
Yeah, how do you see that transition happen?
Yeah, so with Newbie Norm becoming like DIY Dave, it's really just understanding the business more. Like if they're a newbie, they're probably going to get into the nitty gritty. And by the time they get to their second business, if everything went well, if whether they're buying or building at that point, they probably know a lot more what to do. So they want to, then they're usually specialized at this point. So maybe it's SEO. If they bought an affiliate website, that's the most common traffic source for them. If it's e-commerce, maybe it's Facebook ads they got really good at, or maybe they have an Amazon FBA business that they really understand how logistics supply chain stuff works now, and that's their thing. They usually have like one specialization, and that's what they'll focus on. So they'll start looking at businesses that are not doing so well in the areas that they're good at, right? So that they can add value to it. Typically, the leveling path in this MMO of ours is that you go from newbie Norm to do it yourself Dave, and then you'll often
Yep.
become a Flipper Fred. And then after a while, Flipper Freds might become portfolio Pauls, or they might stay Flipper Fred because it can be lucrative, but they might have like a bit of a portfolio, right? And eventually you keep playing this game till you get to investor Ivan status, and now you have teams, you have other people, maybe you've given part of equity to certain pieces of your portfolio to people that work for you, and you're really just more of the finance guy in some aspects at that point. Or maybe you become the strategic Sally. Usually those are the two paths, and they're not always separate, right? So it just depends. But that's usually like the kind of trajectory of what happens there as you get better and better and start, having what I call the asset flywheel. If you're familiar with the HubSpot customer wheel or customer flywheel, right?
Yep.
A customer is in the center of the funnel and it generates more and more customers. I often teach people that you should have an asset flywheel. So your first asset, you saved up all the money to buy it. Like every single penny from the asset does not go in your pocket. The whole point of the asset is to start that flywheel to acquire more assets. And as you keep doing that, that's how you become, a portfolio Paul, investor Ivan, etc.
Earlier, you said that Flipper Fred is typically holding onto a website, an asset, an FBA site, no matter what it is, for 6 to 12 months. Can you talk about why?
Yeah, sure. A quick anecdote. There's one who did it in like 5 minutes. This is like the weirdest. I've never seen it happen. I've only ever seen it happen once. But a guy bought like $100,000 affiliate site from us, and he asked like, "Was there a lot of other people interested in this site?" And he's like, "We're like, yeah, there was quite a few." And like, okay, well, is there anyone interested in buying for like 115K? I'll sell it to them right now. Like, let us ask. So we did. And there was one guy who's like, yeah, I'll buy that for 115K. So he made 15K in like 5 minutes. Never even had the site in his hands, like technically.
So he
So that was
bought
the
it,
fastest one I've ever seen.
so he bought it, and it was still like basically in transition, right? It was like in
Yeah, we were
escrow to move,
migrating it.
right? Migrating. And he was
Yeah.
like, did he just have second thoughts, or was just
No,
like, hey, we'll see what?
he's a flipper, like he's done.
Dude, I
He
love
hasn't
that.
ever done that again, but he has done what I'm about to talk about quite a bit. And just like it was a good site. He thought it was undervalued, and he was right. Someone came in and bought it for 115. So that was really weird week. I've never seen that happen, like I said. But anyhow, the
That's
reason
awesome.
why most flippers keep it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's awesome because I think people fall in love with the businesses way too fast,
They
right?
do.
And I know that I have as well. I've bought, flipped, sold, built, and sold like multiple businesses, multiple websites, and in different verticals. And I'm guilty of it as well. And holding for too long or getting too in love with something instead of like letting the numbers speak for themselves. So I think that's super impressive from the standpoint that he didn't fall in love with it. Like literally went through the emotions of buying the whole thing,
The
right? Like
cycles are
literally
brief.
did the migration, and then it's like, yeah, I don't want, I'll get
It's
out for
yours.
15 grand, no problem. See you later.
You bring
That's
up a
freaking
really
simple.
good point, by the way. That it's unrelated to this, but I think your audience, since a lot of them are probably sellers, would like to hear this. So one of the big issues that sellers have is they get exactly what you just said. They're too emotional about the business. They think like, oh, my business is worth way more than $200,000. This is the next like $1 billion idea, whatever, right? And it makes sense. They have, especially if it's their first business, there's a lot of emotional equity in there. It probably gave them some kind of level up in their lifestyle or freedom or whatever it was, right? So they have this emotional equity in the business, and the buyers just don't have that. They don't have that emotional equity in your business. They're looking at the numbers. To them, your business is not the next $1 billion idea. It's a $200,000 idea that they're about to buy, right? So that's always important to separate. And if you are a seller and you really believe that your business is worth more, I would never sell your business based off potential, because what's going to happen if you say like, oh no, this business is worth way more because of XYZ, it's going to grow, then that buyer is just going to lowball you. Like, sure, okay, when it gets to $1 billion, I will pay you, the remaining amount, and I'll pay you 10 grand for now because you're so confident in this growing. They're going to cut you way down. So the best way to sell a business on potential is to actually talk about the mistakes and the faults, the flaws to the business that you weren't too good at, because that's what builds potential in the buyer's mind, because those mistakes are their opportunity, right? So that you just reminded me of that. Sorry for the tangent. To answer your question on the Flipper Fred, why it's 6 to 12 months is because a business is valued based off its monthly net profit over a period of time. Usually the best windows of time is 6 to 12 months. 12 months is the best. You get the best multiple for that. But you really need that time to increase the net profits. The first 2 months, a Flipper Fred is going like crazy to do everything they can. They're deploying all the money that they have to really build this site up. That's on page, like if it's an affiliate site, like on page SEO, keyword research, CRO, maybe they're building email lists with marketing automation in the background, all that stuff. They want it done as soon as possible so they can reap the rewards of lifting that average net profit up. And then 6 to 12 months later, they get to sell at a higher average net profit. And because now there's like sometimes a full new year of data of the business being profitable, they'll tend to get a better multiple than what the business actually sold for as well.
I had somebody ask me this question and I responded with a very similar response. And then they said, yeah, but
reading my blog post.
do you have a real example, or could you give me an example? Right? Like, what's the difference, the tangible difference between, let's say, 6 and 12? Like, how could you put that into dollars, right? Like, what would that mean? So as your Flipper Paul, you're 3 months in and you're trying to build out your game plan, right? Could you help us conceptualize maybe what that would look like? Like, oh, if I just held on to it for 6 more months, maybe we could get, does that make sense? Like, what's in it if they held out for 6 months longer, right? And they did 12 months instead of 6. Like, could you give us a hypothetical there? Because I think that would really help people break it down in their heads.
Yeah, so it depends a little bit if you're building or buying on this answer. So I'll tackle the building one because that's a little bit simpler, and then I'll go into the more complicated one. So if you're building a site, it's brand new, it's 3 months old or whatever, you want to sell it, right? You could totally sell that business at the 6 month mark, but you're going to get a lower multiple. And the reason why is because this business is too young. It doesn't even have a full year's worth of data. So investors are going to be a little bit more skittish on it, especially if it's a high price one. We had a business that was making crazy amounts of money, like it was only 2 months old. It was already a 7-figure business, and we had to reject it. And like everything looked good on paper, but nothing freaks out an investor more than a short lifespan that's just going like this, right? Like, what is this, a fidget spinner? Like, what am I buying? Like, this thing's going to crash, right? Like, what happens when it steadies out? That same buyer actually came back to us like a year and a half later or something like that. It's still just like crushing it. Like, wow, like that's amazing. So like it can work out, obviously, but if he had tried to sell that business at 6 months and it was a big business, he's going to scare away most people with the capital and something like that. But if it was a small business, he's going to get a lower multiple because he has to accept a discount on his business in order for the investor to buy the business. So basically it's a trade-off. Now, the reason why at 12 months that multiple can go up, sometimes significantly, is because now you have a full 12 months. So you have at least 1 year snapshot of potential seasonalities, of the ups and downs. This is especially important in e-commerce, where you have to think about like, product forecasting with your SKUs. Like it sucks if you run out of inventory around the high season, right? So you have the whole data now, at least of 1 year, to see like how that went. And obviously, as you add more years to that, that makes the track record even better to understand the seasonality of everything. You can say, all right, year over year, I'm growing in December by this clip. So now I can order this amount of products expecting that kind of sales. So that's the big reason. It's just more data. Now, if you're buying a business and you with the plan to flip it, you could do what that guy just did, right? Yeah, the guy who bought 100K, sold it for 115K. The reason why you would wait 6 months to 12 months in that scenario isn't so much because your multiple is going to jump up. It's really an average net profit play, because that's the lever you're trying to explode, more so than the historical track record. Now, because you do wait 6-12 months, you have a longer historical track record, which will give you more value as well for all the reasons I just stated earlier.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, so you're pushing the net profit lever, and if it's too young, I mean, you just got to show the history, because you're going to take typically the last 12 months, right, as the average, right, for the multiplier.
That's what we recommend.
Okay, so if you're only at 6, right, and this thing's like at a peak and it's flying, right, as long as you're confident that it's going to continue going up, right, the no-brainer move should be to hang on to it unless you think it's going to crash.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're confident in the business, there should be, barring anything out of your control, like a Amazon update or Google update or whatever, then there should be nothing wrong with that. The only time I'd recommend to sell when it's younger than 12 months is if you are in a position of needing money. And sometimes that doesn't have to be a negative thing either. Like if you take a discount on your business at a 6-month, but you have a very good system set up of how to reproduce businesses, then even selling at 6 months might actually be a good idea to get that capital to inject into this system and process that you built faster, right? So now, you don't get the big cash flow, but you get enough to start 2 to 3 new assets to go through your process now. And when they get to 6 months, hopefully they're at the same level as the one you just sold, and you can repeat the process if you want to go quicker.
So if your friend, let's say the guy that called you up while you were at the club in Chiang Mai, right, showboating, said, "Hey, Greg, I want to invest in one of the businesses on Empire Flippers," right? What advice or guidelines would you give him, right? What's the one piece of wisdom, or the 80-20, or kind of the thing that you think you could give him to give him the biggest impact?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do, and this is a bit self-promotional, and I don't mean it to be this way, but I would send him a link to a blog series I wrote on Empire Flippers back when I first started, called the Popular Online Business Model Series. And that's where I cover pretty much every business model at a very high level of what we sell. And the reason why I would send that to him is because most of my friends just don't understand different business models, of like online business models, of what exists out there. So it's purely just to get them to understand, like, okay, like there's all this, and now that I know this is the one I'm most interested in. Like, okay, cool. And then I would probably recommend, if I know of one, I would probably recommend a course that I've been through, hopefully one that I vetted. We have a few that we vetted where students have actually come out and sold with us, and that's one of the barometers we say, like, okay, this is probably a good course. So I recommend them to go buy that course, because it's a way cheaper thing to buy a $2,000 course and realize I absolutely hate this, than buying a $200,000 business and realizing I just lost $200,000. So that's what I recommend to start off with, and then from there I would recommend that person get on a call with our business analyst. Like if he wants to buy through a broker, that is, get on a call with our business analyst, do a criteria discovery call, which are totally free. They usually last between 20 minutes to an hour, depending on the complexity of the buyer persona, and we can create a budget. What are you willing to spend? What are you looking for? What are your goals? Like that whole kind of a sheet. Then we go and look to see what we have, what makes sense for you from there. So that's what I usually recommend. It's usually better to start off a little bit slow so you can go a lot faster later.
Yeah, for sure. So dive in and really figure out what it is that you want. Make sure that is in fact what you want before you make a bad decision. Before you jump off the side of the mountain and build a parachute on the way down. Good advice. Good advice.
A lot of people don't get to build the parachute. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, let's look at a few parachute blueprints first before we jump off.
And that makes perfect sense. All right. So on the selling side, then, for people that are interested in being a flipper Fred, right, that have been in the SEO space, maybe, and they're following me They're familiar with empire flippers, and they're interested in potentially really becoming Flipper Fred and making that kind of their move in their path of their future. What advice would you give somebody, or what tricks or advice would you give to somebody that really wants to make that transition to be Flipper Fred?
So in that case, I would definitely at least sell one business with a broker, because that is going to give you a lot of experience of how that works from, like the mechanical sides of it and how buyers work. Once you do that, because if you become a flipper Fred, you're going to be buying, right? And the vast majority of deal flow is going to be with brokers. Like, we list between 8 to 15 new businesses per week, and these are pretty high quality businesses. We reject 88% of businesses that try to get onto our marketplace. So there's a lot of opportunity out there. So that's why I recommend sell at least one business with a broker first, and then understand what the buyer wants, which is soon going to be you. But because you are also the seller, you understand what the seller wants. So there's this weird thing, and I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast, copywriting, right? It's like the most valuable skill in marketing and business and all this stuff, right? But when it comes to time to actually sell your business or buy a business, it feels like all my entrepreneurial friends just like take off that hat and throw it in the garbage can. They're not thinking about the other person anymore. There's all about me. And like when it comes to negotiations, it becomes like this showdown, like take instead of like, a collaboration, which is how negotiation should actually be. Helping both sides solve problems. Like, let's think about what are the emotional pains or the pains and pleasures that this person wants to get by buying or selling this business. So that's some of my advice. The more like strategic or tactical, advice for a flipper Fred is I would focus on just one monetization that you're really, really good at least to begin with. So if you're an SEO guy, focus on SEO businesses. If you're an FBA guy, focus on FBA, etc. And the reason why I say that is because you're going to get really, really good at fixing the low-hanging fruits. So let's say on average, there's like 50% net profit that you can gain from the different improvements you can make. Well, out of that 50%, 20 to 25% of it will probably be really easy stuff to do. So that's where you like have a whole system. So with a content site, like I said, on page CRO, email list, keyword research, new content, all that kind of stuff can be done, or like adding display ads. That's a simple one too. Because a lot of affiliate sites don't even have display ads, because affiliates have this like weird superstitious myth that it takes away earnings, which I have never seen happen. So that's a real easy win for a flipper Fred, to find an affiliate site with no display ads. But yeah, so you have this like structured timeline, like an onboarding stuff. So if you're running an agency, you onboard clients. Well, you should also onboard assets with the same thing. Like, do that 20 to 25% of easy changes within that first month or 2 months, and then you can focus on the other 25%, or maybe not even at all. Because if you increase that 25%, 6 months, 12 months, you're going to make much more than what you put in. So maybe all you ever do is fix the low-hanging fruit, that 20, 25%.
For sure. Yeah, I like how you related it to like an agency. And with agencies, I always talk to them about building their solution stack. And it's just like, here's thing number one, fast result number one that has the biggest result, right? Then fast thing number two that has the biggest result. And you just order them by the thing that gets the best result and takes the least amount of time. And you put that at the beginning of onboarding. So you onboard clients and they just have quick win, quick win, quick win, quick win. And you just, ultimately would want to do the same thing for yourself. And maybe, like you said, even just kind of stop it there, because after it's kind of the law of diminishing
returns. It was much harder, right?
Yeah.
I would recommend going for it if your plan is to make a really big brand, right? But if you're just a flipper Fred, probably not worth it for you, because you have to learn a lot new skills, right? So it's doable for sure. But yeah, I was actually in Sydney in Australia a few weeks ago. I was speaking at a conference that was, mainly agency owners. So I talked about this in their language, just like you said, like having that onboarding list and all. It's like so important. And I also told them, like, if you do this, if like you use your agency to build your assets, you should treat it just like a client. So if you're an agency owner, like listening to this podcast, you want to buy an asset, you should onboard it just like a client. And I even recommend, and this sounds a bit silly, but it's a mindset thing. I'd even recommend making that asset or whatever net profit it earns to pay your agency as like an invoice item to that agency. So your account manager, like, oh, this is actually building money for the agency. Like, you might be losing money personally, but your entity, like your employees, think like, it's a real client. They treat it like a real client, etc.
Yeah, 100% agree. At Invisible, we do all kinds of work outside of Invisible, selling to retail clients, direct B2B, our own projects. And then we toss over all the deals like we're an agency because we do white label fulfillment for agencies. So we'll go sell stuff direct to businesses, right? And then just toss it over like we're another white label partner. I'll go and I'll have my own project, here at Digital Triggers in the podcast. I'm like, hey, I need help with retargeting. And I'll just, they just become the same back end for all of us with everything that we do. And so, yeah, you got to bill it. You got to make the relationship real. And you can't be robbing Peter to pay Paul. So
Yeah, exactly. This kind of sounds like that a little bit, but I promise you it's not. It's just purely to make you actually work on it, right? Like
yeah,
it's
for sure.
like anything, like it's so much easier to do the frustrating work for the client than it is to actually build on your own like wealth, right? Because like, oh, that seems hard, even though it's just the same work, right? Like
Yep,
it's just your mind playing tricks on you.
for sure. Well, cool, man. This has been really, really good. I appreciate you spending almost the last hour, man. Time has freaking flew with
Yeah, no,
us.
I enjoyed it.
And I want to wrap it up. I want to ask you one more thing. So
Sure.
instead of asking you to recommend 3 books, which I feel like every podcast out there does, or tons of them do, we try to change it up a little bit. And so I always like to ask about books. I'm a book reader, but I don't get through near as many books as I'd like. So I always like to ask, what's the one book, right? That as you look at the way that you do business, the way that you interact at Empire Flippers, the thing that's made the biggest impact on your daily life, what would that be and why?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're asking a big literature nerd here. So, but I'm assuming you mean business books.
Let's say business book, yes, since this
Okay,
is a
so
business podcast. But then we'll say literature after.
all right, I got the answer for both. For business, it's technically not a business book, but I highly recommend it if you're in marketing, because it's all about
Okay.
psychology. It's called The Believing Brain by Michael Shermer. So he's like I think
Okay.
a Stanford psychologist, and he discusses like he did all this study on belief, and it is a really fascinating story. The way he writes is quite humorous as well, so it's not dry at all. He has this like funny scene where like he used to go to college to study like parapsychology because he used to believe in paranormal like ghosts and all that stuff, and then he's like, no, this stuff doesn't exist. So now he gets invited to these like paranormal conferences to do keynote speeches where he basically says like, you guys are a bit crazy, here's why. This is the psychology behind it. And they're like, oh, this guy's so funny, like come and see this tarot card thing. But yeah, really great book. Pretty well researched. As far as I know, everything in there is well researched, but it talks about how belief is formed, why it exists, and why some beliefs are like really, really hard to change, and how when you do change them, it's like this minute by minute thing where you never realize it happens. You always just assume you had this belief, but really you didn't. It's a new belief, but it's just built up slowly over time, and that's how like core beliefs change. And if you work in a business like me, where we have a sell cycle that might last 400 days, then you have to build trust, right? You have to slowly change that belief from thinking like, all these businesses are not real assets. They're here today, gone tomorrow. I'm not going to waste money on this scam. To like, no, there's actual investors like investing with us. Here's a PE firm that just raised $100 million. It bought 15 million from us last year. Their portfolio is up by 40%, right? So like that book itself has helped me so much to understand just how slow belief can be changed, especially like real core beliefs, like college. Right, bringing it all back.
That's awesome.
No,
We'll definitely have to check that book out. I haven't heard of it, so that's a great share. And a
yeah,
lot of times
I
at the
tend to
end of
get
these
most of my business
podcasts,
books from non-business ones. So
yeah, at the end of most podcasts, we hear a lot of the same stuff. So when I hear of something new I haven't heard of, let alone read, it's like, all right, great. Yep, that's on the list now. All right,
so
and so we got to ask, since I brought it up, non-business book then.
yes. So I'm a big fiction nerd. I write fiction for fun. If your fans are big literary nerds, I highly recommend the book Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
Okay.
It's my favorite book. Extremely dark, so if you don't like dark stuff, probably should avoid it. He's the same guy who wrote No Country for Old Men and The Road.
Okay.
So No Country,
Yep.
obviously, that became a famous movie. Blood Meridian will never have a movie. I'd be very surprised if it would, because it is just so dark. Like, I don't think anyone would ever take it. But the main villain, this guy named the Judge, he's considered, according to a lot of literary review magazines, like the 43rd, I think, most influential fiction character ever created. And it's just a really good book. It's a Western, basically, like a horror Western.
You got me interested.
It's hard to read, but have to check it out. It's really good.
All right, man. Thanks so much, Greg, for stopping by. Really appreciate it. For people that are interested in connecting with you outside of the podcast, where can we link up to find you on social inside the show notes?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. Just type in, I think my vanity URL is like LinkedIn/IN/Greg the writer or something like that.
Okay.
Or just Gregory Elfrink. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on there. It's a weird last name. So you can find me there. Feel free to send me a connection request. Just say you heard me from this podcast. And or you can just shoot me an email. My email is greg@empireflippers.com. Very easy to get a hold of. If I can be a bit promotional, if you're a seller, you want to see if you want to see what your business might be worth, we've created a free valuation tool. So you can go to empireflippers.com/valuation-tool, and you'll get, or just valuationtool.io, and you'll see our automated tool, and that's based off real sales data. So you'll get a pretty good ballpark estimate of what your business is worth. And
I love that.
Don't have to talk to anyone. So
definitely, we'll link that up in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm sure people are going to love this episode.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it. Hopefully your audience got value.
Yeah, man. And I'm sure we'll meet again one day. So thanks so much, Greg. Adios. We'll talk to you soon. Adios. All right, buddy. Bye-bye.